Hi everyone, it's Leslie from Hungry Heffy Crafts, and I have another card to share today, and it features this cute little kitty cat which is peeking over a fence to a little friend, and the greeting inside says wishing you lived closer. This card was inspired by a stamp set that came free with a magazine that we get in the UK at the very least. It's called Simply Cards and Paper Crafts, and it has this cute stamp set with lots of kitty cats, and there's a puppy dog as well. And I thought I would pair this kitty up with the cow in the Mama Elephant Lunar Animals stamp set. Because this is a new stamp, I'm going to do my trick of using an eraser to just buff off the top surface. That gets rid of any residue on the stamp from the stamp making process. And I'll also do a few test stamps from on a spare piece of paper. I just use a little wire notebook that I have nearby on my craft desk. I'm stamping today using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm also stamping onto some Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. There was a little bit of the stamp that didn't go quite right, so I'm using my Copic multi-liner to fill in the blanks. The reason I used the Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock is that I am going to be pulling out my watercolors today. These are the Kuretake Ganzi Tambi watercolor set, and I've just picked up a cheap palette from my local craft store. The great thing about this that I find is that whenever you use a palette, especially for these little teeny weeny stamped images, you pretty much don't have to take out your big paints all over again. You can reactivate the paint that's on the palette. So that's extremely useful. So you can see here that I am using a standard paintbrush and going back and forth between the kitty cat and the little cow, and that's just to give the layers of paint time to dry. With the watercolor paint, you do get some lovely effects if you build up the colors in different layers. But because these images are so small, it doesn't take very long to paint them or color them in. Of course, you could color them in using some coloring pencils, or do some watercoloring using your distress inks. To create the background of the card, I'm going to be masking off an area and then using my distress inks. This masking paper, it's more like a masking plastic. It's called Masking Magic. You can get a paper type masking, a masking paper as well, which would work just as well. But I've created this hillside curve using my Stitched Hillside Borders die. And I'm going to be adding some color here with my distress ink. When I remove the mask, I have this lovely crisp line. And because this is a plastic type masking product, I can actually reuse it again and again. So I'm using another one of those stitched border dies, those Stitched Trio I think it's called. No, Stitched Hillside Borders. And I'm creating a hill going the other way. This time I'm going to put the mask on the top section over the blue and also on the bottom area as well. And this means that whenever I bring in my Twisted Citron and the Mowed Lawn Green inks, I'm only going to be inking in that little panel in the middle. Now I'm swapping around my masks again. I'm going to cover that green section with the thin strip of the masking plastic. And I can add some ink to the bottom section of the card. And I'm going to use the Twisted Citron once again, but I'll blend that out to a much lighter green ink at the bottom, fading out into white. So near the left hand side here, I'm using a heavy hand with my ink, and as I get closer to the bottom of the card, I'm using a much lighter hand. And that's just to give the card a little bit of interest. So here we go, we've got our hillside panel here. And I'm splattering this with some clean water to give it a distressed look. Now these lunar animal stamps from Mama Elephant do have coordinating dies, but unfortunately I don't have them. So I'm just fussy cutting around this little guy. And I'm going to also cut around this little guy. But first I want to figure out how tall my fence needs to be. Once again, I'm using that same Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock here to create a fence. And I'm using some brown tones for this. I've got gathered twigs here and a little bit of walnut stain as well. Because this fence is going to be featured on the front, the outside of the front panel and the inside of the front panel, I need actually two fences. So I've cut two pieces of card exactly the same size, inked them up exactly the same way, and once again sprayed that or dropped it with some water droplets. Now I'm going to use my wood grain stamp here to give my fence a bit of a wood grain effect. Because this is a nice big stamp set, I'm putting my ink onto the stamp and laying my project on top. And now I'm going to cut each of these pieces of brown cardstock, each of these rectangles, into little wooden panels. They're all 1 centimeter wide, except for the last one, which is a little bit in between 1 and 2 centimeters. So I'm leaving that as is for now. To get rid of that white core cardstock, I'm using some dark brown ink to go around the outside. So now I've taken a card blank and I've penciled in a line that I know I'm going to use for the front panel of my card. So my fences are going to go right along here. So I'm going to stick these in place. I've muddled up my fences because I actually don't want the wood grain to match all the way along. I want it to be random. So I've mixed them all up and I'm turning them round, upside down, etc. And that'll give a better finish. You might notice there on the far left, I've not put the first fence panel right up against the edge. And that's because this last piece here is thicker than the rest. I'm going to slide it on the end here, give that a moment to dry, then flip it over and cut off that remaining piece. And now it can go right on the edge here and fill in that gap. I'm going to do exactly the same on the inside. Once again, taking these panels and layering them down. And with this last piece, I'm overhanging the edge, snipping it off, but first I'm going to add a little bit of ink along that edge. So now I have my fence on the front and the back, and I need to stick my little kitty cat together. I want the front face and the back of the head to line up perfectly. So I've held the panel up against the light so I could line it up, and now I'm fussy cutting around the stamped image, leaving a little white border the same as the cow. Now underneath my fence I need some grass. So once again with the same cardstock, I'm using those two green inks, the Distress inks, Twisted Citron and Modelon, and I've cut that out using once again the hillside border die. Now for my greeting. This is the Sending and Wishing stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to stamp that right onto the grass on the inside section of the front panel. I've prepared and prepped the surface using a anti-static bag or anti-static tool, stamped it using some Versamark ink, sprinkled the embossing powder on top, and then used a pokey tool or a piercing tool to get rid of any little stray pieces of powder, and then heated up using my heat tool. I did the same with the wishing, and because it was a bit more of a bumpier surface, I did have to go back with a white gel pen just to touch it up a little. So let's get this grassy panel in and my little kitty cat in place as well. And the little paws will just be hanging over the fence like this. And then his toes and tail will be on the front like this. Now I noticed that I had only whiskers on one side, so I drew in the ones on the right hand side before sticking my little cow down. For the eyes and the nose of the cow, I came back in with a Sakura glaze pen, and I find this gives the eyes of the animals a real pop and really finishes off the card. So thanks for joining me today. It was a bit of a fun card to make, a little bit different to what I'm usually doing, but I had lots of fun. So please do give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video today. Hop on over to Hungry Heffy Crafts for more of my projects, and feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Have a great day. Bye!